Welcome to this week's episode of the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up for the week ending December 20th, 2024. In this episode, we analyze two critical developments shaping global security. First, we turn to Moscow, where the assassination of Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, Russia's senior military figure in chemical weapons defense, sent shockwaves through the intelligence world. The high-profile attack, allegedly orchestrated by Ukrainian intelligence, reveals a growing trend of precision strikes deep within Russian territory. What does this mean for the ongoing Ukraine-Russia conflict, and how might it escalate the stakes for international security? Next, we uncover alarming details about China's covert influence operations, focusing on a guilty plea in New York from a man who operated an illegal Chinese police station in Manhattan. This revelation exposes Beijing's attempts to monitor and intimidate pro-democracy activists in the US, posing significant challenges to sovereignty and free speech. But that's not all. We'll also examine Canada's vulnerabilities in national security enforcement, a domestic terrorism case that reflects growing tensions in the US healthcare system, and China's expansive use of influence networks across Western democracies. With over 25 years of experience in intelligence and law enforcement, Neil Bisson brings you expert analysis and unparalleled insights into these stories. The level of detail and intelligence you'll hear today rivals high-level classified briefings, ensuring you stay informed on the threats shaping our world. Let's dive in.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, where we analyze the latest news and events in the world of national security, foreign interference, espionage, and intelligence. I'm Neil Bisson, your host and the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. Let's get started. In our first story, we're headed to the UK for an intriguing story entitled Prince Andrew Spy Scandal May Have Further Exposed Threat Posed by China. This article highlights a fascinating yet concerning intersection of royalty, espionage, and foreign interference as it examines how relationships and influence can be exploited by state actors like China. At the center of the story is Yang Tenbo, a Chinese businessman with alleged ties to the Chinese Communist Party and the United Front Work Department. His association with Prince Andrew, a now marginalized member of the British royal family, raised alarm bells in the intelligence community. While Yang denies being an agent, UK authorities excluded him from the country due to concerns about his potential for leveraging relationships for political interference. This case underscores the nuanced method of influence that go beyond traditional espionage. It's not always about stealing secrets, it's about cultivating access and relationships that can be leveraged strategically. As British spy agencies suggest, even seemingly innocent connections can be exploited during geopolitical conflicts, such as potential clash over Taiwan. This scandal unfolds against a backdrop of rapidly deteriorating Sino-British relations. Less than a decade ago, the UK was embracing China with initiatives like allowing investments in nuclear infrastructure. Fast forward to today, and the UK is now confronting a surge of cyberware, espionage allegations, and political interference tied to Beijing. Similar patterns have emerged globally, with cases of Chinese state actors using subtle influence tactics in democratic countries. These efforts aim to gain strategic advantages, often targeting vulnerable and influential figures like the former MP Barry Gardiner or ex-paramilitary researcher Christopher Cash. Charles Parton, a longtime observer of China, highlighted that Prince Andrew, inadvertently or not, brought much-needed attention to the risk posed by China's sophisticated tactics. Meanwhile, British authorities argue that Yang's obscured ties to the Chinese Communist Party represent a broader threat to open societies. Adding to this, my analysis suggests that the Chinese United Front Work Department operates strategically by blending legitimate activities, such as lobbying, with covert influence operations. The line between legitimate influence and subversive activity is internationally blurred, making detection and prosecution even more challenging than with traditional espionage cases. This story is a powerful reminder of the complex ways state actors like China operate to achieve long-term dominance. The growing mistrust between the UK and China, reflected in the courts and tribunals, is part of a larger geopolitical trend. As Beijing continues to expand its reach, Western countries must remain vigilant in safeguarding their democratic processes and national security. Sticking with this issue of China's influence operations, we're analyzing a fascinating story covered by The Guardian entitled How Did Yang Tambo Become a Close Confidant of Prince Andrew? This story uncovers how the relatively unknown Chinese businessman, Yang Tambo, also known as Christopher Yang, gained extraordinary access to Prince Andrew and moved within the highest circles of British power. But more importantly, how it raises red flags about foreign influence, political intelligence operations, and vulnerabilities within influence operations. At the heart of the story is Yang Tambo, a former Chinese civil servant turned self-proclaimed entrepreneur who embedded himself in the UK's political and royal elite. Let's start off with Yang's connections to the UK. Yang was no ordinary businessman. He attended Prince Andrew's private 60th birthday, joined visits to royal residences, and was even given authority to act on behalf of Prince Andrew in business initiatives with China. A letter from Prince Andrew's senior advisor described Yang as sitting at the very top of the tree, a position of influence that many would envy. Moving on to his access, investigations uncovered fawning correspondence between Yang and Prince Andrew's team, and documents showing Yang received talking points from the Chinese embassy ahead of his communications with Duke. He was instructed to manage expectations and avoid making bold promises, raising immediate concerns of coordination and potential exploitation. UK security services believe Yang was connected to China's United Front Work Department, an organization that the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, uses to co-opt influential figures, win them over to Beijing's interests, and advance China's political agenda abroad. This access, paired with the timing of Prince Andrew's personal turmoil related to Jeffrey Epstein, highlights a concerning vulnerability. Influential figures under stress can become prime targets for foreign influence. To understand the significance of Yang Tambo's actions, it's important to discuss the United Front Work Department, or the UFWD. Often described as one of the CCP's magic weapons, the UFWD is tasked with shaping favorable perceptions of China by targeting influential individuals and organizations. This case is part of a broader trend of foreign influence operations conducted by China globally. We've seen similar patterns of embedding agents of influence in political and economic circles across Canada, the United States, and Australia. Examples include Australia's decision to introduce strict anti-foreign interference laws after Chinese nationals infiltrated political campaigns, or Canada's concern about Chinese interference in its elections and diaspora communities. Yang's long-term presence in the UK, nearly 20 years, aligns with the CCP's patient game, where operatives slowly build trust in relationships over time. The fact that the UK's authorities only acted decisively in 2023 after stopping Yang at the airport shows how challenging it can be to detect and respond to such operations. While Yang denies allegations of spying, he insists that he is a self-made entrepreneur and that the evidence paints a different picture. UK security officials pointed to his frequent connections with individuals like the Chinese state and found sensitive communications that appeared coordinated with the Chinese embassy. Court documents highlight that Yang's level of access to Prince Andrew was unusual, particularly the authority he was given to act on behalf of the Duke and international business dealings involving China. From an intelligence perspective, this case reinforces the risk of unchecked foreign influence and the exploitation of personal vulnerabilities. Prince Andrew's situation, dealing with immense public scrutiny, made him an ideal target for China's influence operations. What's particularly alarming is the subtlety of Yang's methods. This wasn't traditional espionage. Instead, it was a slow cultivation of trust and influence, hallmarks of the United Front's operations. This story is a clear reminder of the sophisticated tactics employed by foreign states, particularly China, to influence political, economic, and even royal institutions. Yang Tambo's rise to become a close confidant of Prince Andrew highlights vulnerabilities that can be exploited when influential individuals are under pressure. Looking forward, we can expect more cases like this to surface as countries become increasingly vigilant about foreign interference. It's a wake-up call for all governments, organizations, and individuals to recognize the risk posed by covert influence operations. In our next story, we again focus on the UK's issues with Chinese foreign interference. The article is entitled, Lawyer Accused of Being Chinese Spy in UK Loses Legal Challenge. It involves MI5's interference alert against Christine Lee, accused of political interference on behalf of China, and how MI5's alert was ruled lawful by the UK's Investigatory Powers Tribunal. We'll break down the ruling, its significance for foreign influence operations, and what this means for the ongoing battle against covert interference. The story revolves around Christine Lee, a lawyer accused by MI5 in January of 2022 of engaging in political interference activities on behalf of Beijing. Li has been active in promoting Anglo-Chinese relations and made significant donations to UK politicians, including over £584,000 to Liberal Party MP member Barry Gardiner. The tribunal unanimously ruled that MI5 acted lawfully when issuing the alert. While much of the ruling remains secret for national security reasons, the public judgment stated MI5's concerns had a rational basis. The agency specifically accused Li of working with the United Front Work Department, the UFWD. Does this organization sound familiar? A Chinese Communist Party body known for influencing politics through cultivating relationships with key figures. The case highlights China's persistent effort to interfere in Western democracies through covert influence operations. The UFWD has been at the center of similar cases globally. In Australia, Chinese influence operations triggered reforms to foreign interference laws in 2018. Back here in Canada, concerns over the UFWD activities have dominated headlines, particularly around allegations of elections interference. And in the United States, FBI Director Christopher Wray was repeatedly warning about China's aggressive use of influence networks to target policymakers. Christine Li's case is not an isolated incident. As previously discussed just last week, Anglo-Chinese businessman Yang Tengbo, linked to Prince Andrew, was excluded from the UK over similar allegations of acting as an agent of the UFWD. Yang, like Li, denies the claims. For former MP Barry Gardiner, the fallout was swift. Gardiner cut ties with Li in 2022, following MI5's warning, and emphasized that her donations did not originate from an illegal source. However, the political damage was already done. Li's son, Daniel Wilkes, also felt the impact. He lost his job working for Gardiner on the same day that MI5 issued the interference alert. Wilkes argued that the fallout violated his human rights, citing reputational damage and personal hardship. Yet, the tribunal ruled against him, stating MI5 had not implicated him in the interference alert. These rulings underscore the critical balance between protecting national security and safeguarding individuals' rights. MI5's ability to act decisively against perceived foreign influence reflects growing concern within Western intelligence agencies about China's operations. By publicly issuing interference alerts, agencies aim to increase transparency and resilience against covert threats. The ruling sets a precedent. The public interference in protecting national security outweighs individual privacy concerns in cases of covert foreign interference. The tribunal's decision to uphold MI5's interference alert against Christine Li is a win for the UK national security effort. It shines a light on China's continued influence operations and serves as a warning to those engaged in covert activities on behalf of foreign states. Canadian intelligence agencies have been acutely aware of the United Front Work Department's activities within Canada. The UFWD is dedicated to shaping and influence perceptions of and policy towards the People's Republic of China on a global scale through various overt and covert means. In Canada, the UFWD has been reported to engage in activities such as co-opting elites and facilitating espionage. These operations aim to stifle criticism and manipulate Canadian communities, including diaspora groups and academic institutions. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service has highlighted that the UFD's role in foreign interference, noting that the department seeks to co-opt and neutralize sources of potential opposition to CCP policies. This includes efforts to influence Canadian political parties and electoral processes. A report by Public Safety Canada emphasizes that the UFWD is used by PRC to infiltrate foreign political parties, diaspora communities, universities, and multinational corporations. The report underscores the need for heightened vigilance from democratic countries like Canada in the face of such influence operations. These insights demonstrate that the Canadian intelligence community is not only aware of the UFWD's activities, but is also actively monitoring and addressing the challenges posed by such a foreign interference. In our next story, we focus on a daring and increasingly brazen series of Ukrainian intelligence operations striking inside Russian territory. In an article entitled "Ukraine Spies Target Russian Figures in Increasingly Brazen Attacks," we'll examine how Ukraine's security services are targeting high-profile Russian figures, including Lieutenant General Igor Kirilov, and what these operations mean for the broader intelligence landscape. The article highlights Ukraine's growing ability to strike key figures beyond the battlefield. Lieutenant General Igor Kirilov, Russia's head of chemical, biological, and radiation protection forces, was killed near his Moscow home in a remote detonated scooter bomb attack. This marks one of the most high-profile assassinations since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. The precision and audacity of these operations are significant. Remote detonated vehicles, visual surveillance, and plausible deniability highlight advanced planning and operational skill. Striking inside Russia's capital undermines Moscow's sense of internal security, likely rattling its political and military elites. Much like the pager bomb attacks on Hezbollah by Assad, this attack demonstrates that those who may have a sense of security because of their role in the Russian military and being in their own country may, in fact, still be targeted and eliminated. The fact that Ukraine's security service, the SBU, claimed responsibility sends a clear message. Russian generals, scientists, and influencers are not untouchable, even within Moscow's ring road. These operations are part of a broader trend. Ukrainian intelligence has successfully targeted multiple figures in recent years, including pro-Russian politicians, military officials, and propagandists. In April 2023, a prominent war blogger, Vladlen Tatarsky, was killed in St. Petersburg by a bus turned into a bomb, allegedly delivered by an unsuspected intermediary. In August 2022, Daria Dugina, daughter of Russian ultranaturalist Alexander Dugin, died in a car bomb attack near Moscow. And more recently, a leading missile scientist, Mikhail Stetsky, was shot just days before Kirilov's death, signaling Ukraine's deep reach and coordination. While Ukraine rarely makes official statements, SBU sources have often claimed responsibility, leveraging psychological and strategic gains. These hits don't just eliminate targets, they destabilize and sow mistrust among Russian elites. Kiev-based observer Yuri Kerin suggests Kirilov's assassination could also reflect internal Russian power struggles or efforts to silence witnesses to war crimes. However, if the SBU is behind the attack, as claimed, the operation sends a chilling message: nowhere in Russia is truly safe. From my perspective, these operations reflect Ukraine's evolving asymmetric warfare strategy. Without matching Russia's sheer firepower, Ukraine relies on precision, deception, and infiltration to weaken morale and disrupt leadership. For Russian intelligence, it's a glaring lapse of counterintelligence and security, raising urgent questions about Moscow's ability to prevent future attacks. The killing of Lieutenant General Igor Kirilov marks another escalation in Ukraine's intelligence operations. Whether through bombs, shooting, or sabotage, Ukraine's reach into Russia highlights an evolving multi-front strategy with psychological and operational impacts. Looking forward, these tactics are likely to continue, forcing Russia to reassess its internal security posture while demonstrating Ukraine's growing capabilities. Sticking with the assassination of Kirilov, the next open source story I'll be focusing on is Russia says suspect detained and killing of senior general in Moscow. The Federal Security Service, FSB, has detained an Uzbek suspect claiming he was recruited by Ukrainian intelligence. The FSB alleges the suspects executed the attack in exchange for $100,000 and a promise to relocate to the European Union. This incident highlights the evolving nature of targeted assassinations in modern conflicts. The operation's meticulous planning, placing a homemade explosive in a scooter, monitoring the target via live stream, and detonating it remotely, demonstrates a sophisticated level of operational tradecraft. If Ukraine's involvement is confirmed, it signals a willingness to strike high-profile figures deep within Russia, amplifying the stakes in the ongoing conflict. Kirilov, 54, was under sanctions from countries like Canada and the UK for alleged war crimes, including the use of banned chemical weapons in Ukraine. He was a prominent figure in Russia's military hierarchy, often accusing Ukraine of deploying toxic agents, a claim widely dismissed as propaganda by Kiev and its allies. Assassinations of high-ranking officials are not unprecedented, but this case stands out for its precision and timing. Just a day before the attack, Ukraine's security service, the SBU, had launched a criminal investigation into Kirilov. This mirrors earlier incidences where intelligence agencies have employed assassinations as both tactical and psychological tools in warfare. While the FSB attributes the attack to Ukrainian intelligence, questions remain about the conditions under which the suspect confessed and the veracity of the evidence. The Kremlin has labeled the killing as a terrorist act, while an anonymous SBU official described Kirilov as a war criminal and a legitimate target. This divergence in narratives underscores the propaganda battles that often occupy such incidences. This operation is a textbook example of intelligence-led kinetic action aimed at undermining adversarial leadership and morale. The target, one of Russia's top generals, was carefully chosen to maximize strategic and symbolic impact. The assassination of Lieutenant General Igor Kirilov marks a significant escalation in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, with potential repercussions for international security. It underscores the growing role of covert operations and targeted killings in modern warfare. Looking ahead, we may see further retaliatory measures by Russia and an intensified focus on high-value targets in this ongoing struggle. For our next story, we return to Canada and turn our attention to a headline out of Ontario, where a dentist lost his license after revelations he was previously convicted for helping Iran evade international sanctions. Some of you may remember that I discussed this story some months back and referenced how the lack of coordination between the federal and provincial systems have allowed for national security threats to evade notice or action. As such, this case raises serious questions about name change policies, international sanctions enforcement, and the broader implications for Canadian security. On November 20th, the Royal College of Dental Surgeons of Ontario revoked the license of Dr. Arush Cohen, a dentist practicing under a name he adopted following a criminal conviction. Dr. Cohen was revealed to be Aresh Yousafzai, an Iranian-born Canadian who pleaded guilty in 2021 to helping his brother export sensitive manufacturing equipment to Iran, violating international sanctions. After serving his sentence in the U.S., Yousafzai returned to Canada, legally changed his name, and became a licensed dentist in Ontario. His brother, also known as Amin Cohen, worked as a compliance officer. But the scheme unraveled when Canadian immigration authorities uncovered the brothers' past during deportation proceedings against Amin. The Canada Border Service Agency described the brothers' actions as undermining Canada's efforts to contain Iran, with implications for terrorism and nuclear security. The Ontario government is now reviewing its name change policies to prevent serious offenders from concealing their identities. Iran has long been a source of instability in the Middle East, leading to an axis of resistance that includes groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. The Iranian regime has also been linked to global assassination plots against dissidents and critics, including former Canadian MP Irwin Coulter. The case of the Yousafzai brothers adds another layer of concern. By circumventing sanctions and smuggling restricted equipment to Iran, their actions not only bolstered the regime, but also posed direct threats to Canada's national security. According to CBSA, these activities may have contributed to advancing Iran's nuclear ambitions, a significant concern for both Canadian and global security. This story is a cautionary tale about the vulnerabilities in Canada's name change system and the challenges of enforcing international sanctions. While name changes are often intended to protect personal privacy or safety, cases like this highlight how such mechanisms can be exploited. From an intelligence perspective, this case underscores the importance of robust background checks for individuals in sensitive professions. It also demonstrates how sanction violators can attempt to reintegrate in society under new identities, evading accountability. The revocation of Dr. Cohen's dental license marks an important step in addressing the broader risk of name change loopholes and sanctions violations. However, it also raises urgent questions about how Canada monitors and deters individuals with histories of undermining national security. We now turn to a chilling case out of New York, where Luigi Magnoni, accused of assassinating UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson, now faces an additional terrorism charge. This story highlights the intersection of domestic terrorism, corporate influence, and the growing public anger towards the healthcare system in the United States. On December 4th, UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down in broad daylight as he walked to a Manhattan hotel for an investor conference. Luigi Magnoni, a 26-year-old computer science graduate from an influential Baltimore family, was arrested days later in Pennsylvania. Authorities have now charged Magnoni with murder as an act of terrorism, citing the targeted nature of the attack and its intent to intimidate. Prosecutors described the killing as a well-planned operation designed to send a message. Magnoni allegedly used a 3D printed gun, suppressor, and fake IDs to execute his plan and escape. Bullet casings at the scene were engraved with words like deny, defend, and depose, a grim reference to accusations against healthcare insurers of denying claims and delaying payouts. In his writings, Magnoni expressed disdain for what he called a parasitic health insurance company and corporate greed, blaming them for the rising costs of healthcare and stagnant life expectancy in the U.S. His actions appear to have been motivated by his broader frustration with systematic inequities. The additional terrorism charge reflects the broader implications of Magnoni's actions under New York law. A crime can qualify as terrorism if it is intended to intimidate a civilian populace or influence government policy. In this case, the murder of a high-profile executive in one of the busiest areas of Manhattan was not only a violent crime, but also a statement of defiance against corporate and systematic power. The tragic events also shines a light on the mounting frustration many Americans feel towards the healthcare system. In the wake of the killing, social media lit up with personal accounts of denied claims and exorbitant medical costs. While Magnoni's actions were widely condemned, they appear to tap into a deeper societal anger toward healthcare inequalities in the U.S. This case, from the lens of an intelligence perspective, raises critical questions about the role of lone actors in domestic terrorism. Magnoni's background, a privileged upbringing, Ivy League education, and no prior criminal record, defies the typical profile of a terrorist, illustrating how complex and varied these cases can be. Additionally, the use of a 3D printed firearm and fake identities show a level of sophistication that underscores the growing challenges for law enforcement and intelligence agencies. These tools, increasingly accessible, make it easier for individuals to carry out high-profile attacks without detection. The murder of Brian Thompson is a stark reminder of how grievances, whether justified or misguided, can manifest in dangerous and violent ways. The terrorism charges against Magnoni reflects the severity of his actions and the potential ripple effects on public safety, corporate security, and the ongoing debate around healthcare reform in the U.S. For our last story this week, we'll be sticking with international intrigue out of New York City, where we take a look at an individual who pled guilty to operating a secret Chinese police station in Manhattan's Chinatown. This case highlights the growing reach of China's transnational repression efforts and their implications for American sovereignty and security. On Wednesday, 60-year-old Chen Jingpin pleaded guilty to conspiring to act as an unregistered agent of the Chinese government. Chen was charged with opening and operating an illegal overseas police station on behalf of China's Ministry of Public Security, or the MPS, in the heart of Manhattan. The station, which operated out of the office building in Chinatown, provided some legitimate services, such as helping Chinese citizens renew their driver's license. However, it also had a more sinister purpose, assisting Beijing in locating and suppressing pro-democracy activists within the United States. Chen's co-defendant, 62-year-old Harry Liu Zhengwang, is awaiting trial after pleading not guilty. Prosecutors allege that both men acted under the direct control of the MPS, violating U.S. laws and sovereignty. When FBI agents raided the station in October of 2022, they discovered that communications between the defendants and the MPS officials had been deleted from their phones, an apparent attempt to conceal their activities. This case is part of the broader U.S. effort to counter China's transnational repression schemes, which target members of the Chinese diaspora who speak out against Beijing. In recent years, similar cases have surfaced, including attempts to coerce U.S.-based Chinese nationals to return to China under threat of harm to their families. The establishment of the secret police station in the United States represents an alarming escalation in China's efforts to monitor, intimidate, and suppress dissent among the overseas Chinese community. While the station disguised itself as providing routine consular services, it acted as a hub for surveillance and harassment, undermining American sovereignty. This is not an isolated incident. In 2020, the Justice Department charged individuals working on behalf of Beijing in a campaign to force a New Jersey man to return to China. Just this past September, a former aide to New York government Kathy Hochul was charged with secretly acting as a Chinese agent. These cases highlight the lengths to which China will go to influence U.S. policy, cultivate relationships with American political figures, and suppress dissent at home and abroad. As a former intelligence officer, this case reveals critical vulnerabilities in how foreign governments exploit open societies like the United States. The establishment of a secret police station in Manhattan required resources, coordination, and direction from Beijing's Ministry of Public Security. It also underscores the challenge of identifying and countering covert foreign influence operations in the diaspora communities of major cities like New York. This case also highlights the importance of safeguarding free speech and dissent within the Chinese diaspora. As U.S.-based activists continue to speak out against the Chinese Communist Party, protecting them from transnational repression is crucial for upholding democratic principles. The conviction of Chen Jingpin underscores the ongoing battle between the United States and China over espionage, influence, and repression. This case is yet another reminder of the challenges posed by authoritarian regimes that seek to exert control beyond their borders. This case also reaffirms the importance of vigilance, both in protecting democratic values and ensuring the security of diaspora communities. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week's wrap-up. Speaking of wrapping, I hope all my listeners have had their presents wrapped and are ready for the holidays. I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and hope you get a chance to relax with friends and family and enjoy a safe and happy holiday. Until next week, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. Every episode is built on rigorous research and expert analysis, offering you intelligence and insights comparable to high-level government briefings. From the evolving Ukraine-Russia conflict to the covert influence operations shaping Western democracies, these stories help you stay ahead in an ever-changing world. If you found today's episode insightful, please like, comment, or share it. Your support helps us reach more listeners who value staying informed about the critical issues shaping our global security landscape. be sure to visit our website, the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, where Neil Bisson, director of the network, offers deeper commentary, resources, and professional insights on this week's stories. With Christmas and Boxing Day just around the corner, we want to wish all of you a safe, peaceful, and joyful holiday season. Thank you for being part of our engaged and informed network. As Neil always says, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe. We'll see you next week for more essential intelligence analysis.